The velvet aisle was silent. Hundreds of heads turned as the little girl, just 8 years old, stepped forward beneath the vaulted ceiling of St. Paul's Cathedral. Her flower crown slipped sideways, and her trembling hand clutched something small and worn, an old teddy bear, frayed at the seams. She held it to her chest like a shield as her voice cracked through the stillness. "You can't marry her, Dad. She's lying. She wants to kill you." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The bride's smile froze. The groom's eyes filled with confusion. Then came the sound, slow, unmistakable, the tearing of Velcro. From the bear's back, the girl pulled a folded envelope. "Everything's in here. Please, just look." And for a split second, time stopped, caught between belief and betrayal, between a wedding and a warning. The cathedral's stillness shattered with the sound of a man's voice. "Sophie, what are you doing?" Nathan Bennett's tuxedoed figure stepped away from the altar, confusion flickering across his face. His guests shifted uncomfortably in their pews, craning necks, whispering. The priest hesitated mid-sentence, clutching the Bible tighter as the bride, Victoria Hayes, turned slowly, her eyes locked onto the little girl standing at the edge of the aisle like a ghost. "I said, stop the wedding," Sophie whispered again, louder this time, her voice echoing off the marble. "She's not who you think she is." Victoria's practiced composure faltered only for a blink, her smile twitching as she stepped toward the girl. "Sweetheart," she said in syrup-sweet tones, "this isn't the time for games. I'm not playing." Sophie opened the bear in her arms with a small tremble. A rustle of papers spilled out, her small hands sorting them with a seriousness that silenced the entire church. "Dad, you said Mom taught me to trust my instincts. Please. Just read these." Olivia stood in the back pew, her eyes wide with urgency. She nodded once at Nathan. "Take the papers," she mouthed. Nathan looked at his daughter. Her face was pale, defiant, the same tight expression she'd worn at her mother's funeral, when she refused to cry in front of anyone but him. His hands shook as he reached out, fingers brushing against the envelope. Inside, photos. Screenshots. A printout of an insurance policy. A name circled in red ink, Vanessa Hill. "What is this?" His voice cracked like glass under weight. "What is this, Victoria?" She froze. That name, Vanessa, hung in the air like a fire alarm. The guests murmured louder now. "Who's Vanessa Hill? Is this a setup? Did you know about this?" "Don't be ridiculous," Victoria snapped, stepping forward with forced laughter. "That's a mistake. That's not. You told me her name was Victoria Hayes," Sophie cut in, holding up a printed wedding announcement with Victoria's photo and name. "But I found this last week." She pulled out a grainy photo from the bottom of the bear. She was with a man. They were kissing. In a car outside my school. His name is Tyler. Or Brandon. She changed his name, too. Nathan looked from the papers to Victoria. Her chest was rising too fast. Sweat shimmered beneath her perfect makeup. I don't know what this child is talking about," she said, but even her voice cracked then, and her hand trembled as she tried to grab the envelope. "No," Sophie said, stepping back. "You can't have it. It's the only copy." "Is that true?" Nathan asked, his voice low. "Tell me the truth, Victoria. Right now." Olivia was already moving down the aisle. She placed a protective hand on Sophie's shoulder and addressed the priest. "This ceremony is suspended. We have reason to believe this woman is engaged in insurance fraud, and possibly attempted murder." Gasps turned to commotion. Phones rose in the air. Some guests stood, others tried to hush the chaos, but the spell was broken. Sophie's hands were still clutching the bear like it might protect her again. Victoria turned slowly toward Nathan. "Nathan. I love you. I gave up everything for this." Don't let them poison this day." He didn't answer. His hand had dropped to his side. His fingers clenched and unclenched as he looked at the photo of Victoria, no, Vanessa, wrapped in the arms of a man who wasn't him. The priest stepped down, gently closing the Bible. "Perhaps, this is a matter for the family to discuss privately." Sophie looked up at her father. "You said I was the only one you'd trust if something ever felt wrong. Remember?" Nathan's voice was barely above a whisper. "I remember." Victoria made one last move, swift, desperate. She lunged toward Sophie, hand outstretched. "Give me that." But Olivia was faster. She shoved herself between them, pushing Victoria back with a strength that surprised them all. A security guard, alerted by the growing unrest, hurried down the aisle. "She's not safe," Olivia said sharply, pointing at the bride. "Detain her. And keep her away from the girl." "I'm calling the police," Nathan said then, his voice steel now. "Let them sort this out." Victoria froze mid-motion. Something broke behind her eyes. She scanned the crowd, guests gaping, some filming, some murmuring, none on her side anymore. She backed away from the altar like it had caught fire. "This isn't over," she whispered. "You've just ruined everything." The security guard gently took her arm, but she didn't resist. Her eyes stayed locked on Sophie as she was led out the side door. And for a long moment, silence returned to the cathedral. Heavy. Sacred. Shattered. Sophie stood still in the center of it all, her bare hanging limp now, papers scattered at her feet. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. Nathan stepped toward her, every movement weighted. Then he knelt, level with her eyes. His voice broke when he said, "I'm so sorry." But Sophie only asked one thing, barely audible. "Do you believe me now?" And he nodded. Only once. The first time Sophie met Victoria was on a rainy Thursday afternoon when the clouds hung low over Boston and the house still smelled faintly of her mother's favorite candle, a scent Nathan refused to throw away. Sophie had just returned from art class, her rain boots squeaking on the hardwood floor as she kicked them off at the door. Nathan stood in the hallway, half smiling, one hand behind his back like he was hiding a secret. "Sweetheart," he said, "I want you to meet someone." From behind him, Victoria appeared like she had walked out of a perfume commercial, tall, elegant, chestnut hair cascading over one shoulder, her heels silent on the wood, her smile polished and wide. She knelt down, meeting Sophie's eyes. "You must be Sophie," she said in a voice smooth like melted sugar. "Your dad talks about you all the time." Sophie nodded politely, unsure why her father's face lit up so brightly just because this woman walked into the room. She didn't say much that day, just clutched her damp sketchbook close and watched as the two of them laughed at things she didn't understand. That night, she found her father in his study, staring out the window as the rain hit the glass in rhythmic taps. "Do you like her?" he asked gently. "She's different," Sophie answered, unsure if that was a good or bad thing. Nathan didn't press. He just patted her hand and whispered, "You know, it's okay if we let someone else in. It doesn't mean we're forgetting her." But the truth was, Sophie wasn't afraid of forgetting her mom. She was afraid her dad already had. In the weeks that followed, Victoria became a fixture in the Bennett mansion. She left little gifts on Sophie's pillow, lavender-scented soaps and glitter pens and once even a bracelet that felt too cold against her wrist. She started calling the guest bedroom our space and suggested repainting Sophie's room in colors that felt more grown-up. Every time Sophie tried to explain her discomfort, her dad would smile and say, "She's trying, sweetheart. Just give her a chance." So Sophie did. She tried. She let Victoria brush her hair once, even though the tugging felt more like control than care. She went with them to the park, watched them hold hands when they thought she wasn't looking, listened as Victoria talked about dream weddings and European honeymoons and redecorating the entire house. And still, Sophie tried. Because her dad laughed again. Because he whistled while making breakfast again. Because he no longer stared at the piano like it might swallow him whole. One evening, while cleaning out the attic, Sophie found a dusty box labeled Mom's Things. Inside were old photographs, a yellowing wedding veil, and a music box that no longer played. She sat with it for hours, the silence of the broken song louder than anything Victoria ever said. When she showed it to her dad, he smiled and said, "Maybe we can fix it someday." But when Victoria walked in, she said, "Or maybe it's time we let the old things go." That night, Sophie had her first nightmare. In it, her mother was trying to warn her, mouthing words she couldn't hear through the glass of a locked window, while Victoria stood behind her, smiling with a shadow stretching too long behind her. The next morning, Sophie noticed the family photos had been rearranged. A few missing. A few replaced. When she asked Rosa, the housekeeper, she said Victoria had suggested a cleaner aesthetic. But to Sophie, it felt like someone was trying to erase her mother one frame at a time. The final straw came when her dad announced they were getting married. "In 3 months," he beamed, "and I want you to be our junior bridesmaid." Sophie froze. Her heart didn't leap. It sank. "Isn't that wonderful?" Victoria asked, crouching beside her, placing a manicured hand on her shoulder. Sophie nodded slowly. "Sure." That night, she pressed her ear to the wall and listened. She heard Victoria on the phone, her voice sharper than usual. "He's more attached to the kid than I thought," she said. "But don't worry, Tyler. He's too blind to see anything." Sophie's breath caught in her throat. She didn't sleep that night. The next day at school, Sophie sat alone during lunch, her sandwich untouched, her eyes on the drawing she'd made, a girl standing in front of a burning house, holding a teddy bear in one hand and her mother's music box in the other. When Mrs. Reynolds walked by, she didn't say anything. She just sat beside her quietly, as if sensing the storm brewing in Sophie's small chest. "Is everything all right at home?" she asked softly. Sophie wanted to say yes. But her silence said everything. That afternoon, Victoria picked her up from school in a different car. A black one. A man sat in the driver's seat, and as Sophie climbed into the back, Victoria whispered, "This is Tyler, my wedding planner." The man didn't look at her. Just kept his eyes on the road. Later, that same night, Sophie would find a photo in Victoria's tablet, one of her and Tyler, laughing in front of the Eiffel Tower. No wedding plans. No client notes. Just them, alone, holding hands. She knew then. Knew that her instincts weren't just fear. They were warnings. Her mother's absence wasn't meant to be replaced. It was meant to be protected. And if her father couldn't see what Sophie now saw with painful clarity, then she'd have to be the one to act. Not for herself. For him. For the mother whose photos were vanishing. For the laughter that sounded borrowed. For the music box that never played again. That night, she held her teddy bear tightly and whispered into its stitched ear, "I'll fix this. I promise." Outside her window, the rain began to fall again. Soft at first. Then heavier. As if the house itself was beginning to cry. The morning light filtering through the mansion windows was colder than usual, as if the house itself had begun to sense the shift. Sophie sat at the kitchen counter, swirling her spoon in a bowl of oatmeal she had no intention of eating. Across from her, Victoria scrolled through her phone, sipping espresso with perfect posture and distant eyes. Nathan had already left for an early meeting downtown. "I've arranged a fitting for your dress after school," Victoria said without looking up. "Try not to slouch when they take your measurements." Sophie didn't respond. She studied the woman's profile carefully, the way she pursed her lips between texts, the way her ring finger bore no tan line despite the engagement diamond. "I like the one I wore to Mom's funeral," Sophie said quietly, almost daring her. "Black always feels honest." That earned her a sharp glance, just for a moment, before Victoria smiled again like nothing had been said at all. We're moving forward now, sweetheart. The past can't live in every room forever. Sophie's hand curled tighter around her spoon. That afternoon, while Victoria was distracted on a call in the guest room, Sophie crept into her father's study. The computer was locked, but she knew the password, her mother's birthday, reversed. She typed it in with trembling fingers and opened the browser. She didn't know what exactly she was looking for, only that she had to keep digging. Victoria's name brought up polished LinkedIn profiles, curated charity bios, articles about fundraising galas. All sterile. All too perfect. But when she typed Vanessa Hill plus Boston, the results changed. A police report from 8 years ago. A blurred photo in a tabloid archive. And there, an obituary from a small town in Arizona where a man had died under unusual circumstances, just 6 months after marrying a woman named Vanessa Hill. No charges. No follow-up. Just a list of assets transferred to the surviving spouse, now unreachable. Sophie printed it out and slipped it into her backpack along with the screen captures. She didn't know yet what the whole puzzle looked like, but she had begun to gather the edges. That evening, as Victoria floated from room to room talking flower arrangements and guest counts, Sophie watched her father closely. He looked happy. Lighter than she'd seen in years. But it wasn't real. It was borrowed, like a coat that didn't belong to him. "Dad," she said softly, "do you ever think you're moving on too fast?" He chuckled, mistaking her meaning. "Sweetheart, I know it feels sudden. But life doesn't wait. Victoria helped me feel again. That counts for something." Sophie wanted to scream. Instead, she just nodded and left the room before her tears gave her away. 3 days later, Sophie witnessed it with her own eyes. The lie. The betrayal. It was raining again, always raining, it seemed, and she waited under the school's awning for Victoria to pick her up. Across the street, parked beneath a broken lamppost, sat a sleek black car. And inside it, Victoria. Not alone. Tyler sat beside her, laughing. Then he leaned in and kissed her like it wasn't the first time. Sophie stepped back, her breath caught in her throat. She fumbled for her tablet, took a photo. Blurry. Shaky. But enough. Victoria arrived 10 minutes later in her usual red convertible, acting breathless and apologetic, blaming traffic like nothing had happened. Sophie got in, heart racing, face blank. "How was your day?" Victoria asked sweetly. "Quiet," Sophie replied. "I saw a car get towed. People were shouting." Victoria laughed too easily. Some people are always causing scenes. That night, while Victoria was in the shower, Sophie searched her tablet again and found a folder marked Insurance. Inside were PDFs, contracts, and a scanned policy document worth $50 million. Beneficiary, Victoria Hayes. Policyholder, Nathan Bennett. Effective immediately upon marriage. Sophie's breath caught. This wasn't suspicion anymore. This was proof. But even then, she didn't know who to show. Her dad wouldn't believe her. Not without more. So she printed the file and folded it into a Ziploc bag. She sewed it into the lining of her teddy bear, careful to leave no trace. Then she started recording things, snippets of conversation, screenshots, timestamps. She titled it all, Operation Truth. And she waited. Each night, the house grew darker even when the lights were on. Victoria's smiles were too wide. Her footsteps too deliberate. Sophie stopped sleeping. She started hiding things under her bed, a flashlight, a baseball bat, a backup copy of everything. In the silence of the night, she'd whisper to the bear, "We're almost there. Just a little longer." Until the hallway creaked. Victoria stood there one night without knocking. "I heard you moving." "Trouble sleeping?" she asked, too calmly. "You know, Sophie, it's natural to be anxious." Change is scary. But you'll get used to our new life. It'll be just the two of us while your father's away. Sophie gripped the bear tighter. I'm fine, she whispered. Thanks. Victoria smiled again, but her eyes didn't. Good. I'd hate for anything to ruin the wedding. Especially you. And then she left, her perfume lingering in the hallway like a threat. Sophie locked her door that night. The next morning, she told Mrs. Reynolds everything, well, almost everything. She didn't mention the bat or the bear. Just enough to be taken seriously. She's not who she says she is, Sophie said. She's planning something. I just don't know how to stop it. Her teacher nodded slowly, processing. Start writing it all down, she said. Details. Dates. What you saw. People will listen when you're organized. Truth doesn't always scream, it builds. Sophie nodded. For the first time, someone believed her. Not fully. But enough. What she didn't know was that Victoria had started searching, too. She suspected. She watched. She even tried to access Sophie's tablet once but failed to crack the password. The dance had begun, one step forward, one misstep away from collapse. And on the surface, the mansion buzzed with wedding preparations, flowers and photographers and a cake tasting that tasted like ash to Sophie. The mask was slipping. The clock was ticking. And the bear was ready. 3 days before the wedding, Sophie woke to the sound of her bedroom door handle rattling in the dark. At first, she thought it was a dream, until she saw the shadow pass across the thin crack of moonlight on the floor. She held her breath, heart pounding, as the door finally gave a quiet click and opened. But no one entered. Only silence followed. When she sat up, the teddy bear was gone from her nightstand. She bolted out of bed and found it on the floor beneath the window, half zipped open. The plastic bag she had sewn inside was untouched, just slightly crumpled, but the message was clear: Victoria had come searching. From that moment on, Sophie stopped waiting. She sent a message to Olivia that night: I need help. It's urgent. And then she went to work. She made 2 new copies of every file and photo and hid them in separate places, one behind the loose tile in her bathroom, the other folded into a sock and placed at the back of her drawer. She wrote a letter to her father in case she didn't get to speak to him in time. She practiced the words she would say if no one else would speak up. And on the morning of the wedding, Sophie dressed in the pale blue junior bridesmaid gown that Victoria had chosen for her, the same color as Victoria's eyes, but tucked the teddy bear beneath her arm, just like she used to on the first day of school. Outside the cathedral, cameras flashed and guests arrived in tuxedos and heels. A string quartet played softly in the vestibule. Sophie was ushered into a side room to wait for her cue to walk. Victoria entered 10 minutes later in her designer wedding gown, radiant, every inch the perfect bride. But up close, her eyes darted with the restless sharpness of someone trying to outrun a storm. You look lovely, she said to Sophie, adjusting a flower in her hair. And quiet. I appreciate that. Sophie looked her dead in the eye. You shouldn't. Victoria blinked but said nothing. She left the room, her heels clicking sharply on the stone floor, and Sophie was left alone with the bear on her lap and the weight of the moment pressing into her chest like armor. When her cue came, she walked slowly, deliberately, down the aisle, eyes locked on her father at the altar. He looked proud. Oblivious. Sophie felt like she was drowning in slow motion. The priest began the ceremony. Words floated like mist through the cathedral: love, devotion, unity, vows. Sophie held the bear tighter, felt the stitches pressing into her palm. She looked back and found Olivia in the last pew, giving her the smallest nod. Now. Or never. If anyone knows why this couple should not be joined in matrimony. The words echoed. Sophie stepped forward. You can't marry her, Dad. Gasps. Whispers. Shuffling. The music stopped. The moment unfolded exactly as it had in her nightmares, only now she was wide awake. She didn't hesitate. She held up the bear. I have proof. Inside here. She's lying. Her name isn't Victoria Hayes. It's Vanessa Hill. She's been lying to you this whole time. Nathan froze. His eyes flicked between his daughter and his bride. Sophie, what are you? She's planning to kill you after the wedding, Sophie said, her voice steady, clear, devastating. She already took out a life insurance policy. $50 million. She's done this before. She has a partner. His name is Tyler. You've seen him. The guy in the car. He's not her wedding planner. He's her boyfriend. Victoria laughed, a brittle sound that cracked under its own weight. This is absurd. She's jealous. She's been acting out ever since I came into her life. But Olivia was already walking down the aisle. She pulled out her phone and held up the photos. I hired a private investigator. You've done this to 2 other men. Their families didn't see it coming. But this time, we did. A hush spread through the room like fog. Nathan stared at the evidence as if it were a foreign language. Then his eyes settled on Sophie. The teddy bear. The pictures. The shaking hands of his daughter, holding back tears with a kind of courage no child should need. Victoria stepped back. Her smile vanished. This is a setup, she hissed, backing toward the cathedral side exit. You've all gone insane. But before she could run, 2 plainclothes officers stepped out from behind the pews. Vanessa Hill, one said calmly. You're under arrest for fraud, attempted murder, and conspiracy. As they cuffed her, Victoria twisted around to face Sophie. This isn't over, little girl. You'll regret this. Sophie didn't flinch. No. You will. The police led her down the aisle as stunned guests parted like the sea. Olivia rushed to Nathan's side, helping him sit down. The ceremony was over. The cathedral, once dressed in white and roses, now felt like a courtroom that had finally delivered its verdict. Hours later, the mansion was quiet again. The flowers had been taken down. The catering trucks were gone. The guests had dispersed into a blur of headlines and disbelief. Sophie sat on the back porch, her bare feet swinging above the lawn, the teddy bear in her lap, unzipped now, empty, but whole. Her father stepped outside, eyes tired, shirt sleeves rolled up, hair a mess. I read your letter, he said. Sophie didn't look at him. You didn't believe me until it was almost too late. I know, he said, sitting beside her. And I'll never forgive myself for that. But you saved me. You saved both of us. He placed something small in her hand, a compass necklace, delicate and silver. So you always know where you are. And where home is. Sophie held it tightly. I'm just glad she's gone. Nathan looked out over the garden. Me too. But I'm even more glad you stayed. They sat in silence as the sun dipped low, casting golden light over the grass, the house, the tree where Sophie used to climb before everything got so complicated. And in that fading light, without music or vows or dresses, a real ceremony took place, a father and a daughter, not starting over, but starting true.